fear holds a lot of people back. They say the only two fears we're born with, it's the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear has been instilled, trained, programmed with us.
As long as you can get that mindset of debt not being bad because it is producing wealth and creating capital, that's really where you can start to separate yourself from knowing that you're buying property versus knowing that you're building a portfolio for purpose.
People would rather be wrong than different. Such an unfortunate mentality that we just want to simulate with those around us. But one thing to remember, you married the property, not the interest rate. Interest rates are always going to change. Buying the right asset in the right market at the right time is really going to get you through.
So my assumption here is that our assessment rate is far more safe than 3% right now. It's probably sitting at 1%, I assume.
Wayne Gretzky, greatest hockey player of all time, he said he based his whole career on what his father told him when he's young. Don't go to where the puck is, go to where the puck's going to be.
Welcome back to another episode of the Lazy Equity Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have Justin McBride, my partner in crime here at the Investors Agency, our head of growth and sales. Justin, thanks so much for your time again, buddy. Really look forward to catching up with you, and I think your perspective on, I guess, where the client is coming from, that resonates with where their journey starts, is a big eye-opener to myself.
Yeah, it's good. It's been a hiatus since last time I was here, but obviously so many interesting conversations are happening with, obviously people are a bit unsure of what the next 12, 24 months looks like, and obviously excited to unpack that. So.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the opportunity that I'm excited to talk about, because we've seen this before and I'm not going to go into the budget chat, like we've spoken enough around the budget. I think we're at the point in time now where, we've seen what has happened in the past time and time again when sentiment drops, and this is now our opportunity to understand how to navigate through the next period when we see sentiment start to return. And very quickly does that sentiment return, and a lot of the time when that happens, people become almost sheepish-like, not to the scared factor, but more so that they follow each other and they do what the herd does. And I think today's a bit of a discovery around talking about the points to consider now to make those decisions understood for when you are ready, that you have all of your right tools in place.
Yeah, it's true. It's just human nature that people would rather be wrong than different. I used to coach kids, obviously in basketball for many years and all that, and I would have kids line up. Didn't matter how many times I told the first kid, go to their right. If the first one went to their left, the next five would know they should be going to the right, but yet didn't want to be wrong didn't want to be different, since they would rather be wrong and all follow the first kid. And I think that's such an unfortunate mentality that we just want to simulate with those around us. We can get into the evolutionary biology of our minds and how that all kind of comes about.
Yeah.
But there's just so much opportunity, especially as Warren Buffett says, the best time to buy is when there's blood on the street. Two things fuel markets: economics and emotions. The economics haven't changed, but the emotion is obviously quite different now than what it was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But emotions are fleeting. They go and come. They're never forever. They're never that ongoing state of mind. So therefore, we got to kind of be ready to be able to capitalize when we can.
Mate, I couldn't have said it any better. I think you're so right. Kids would follow, I guess, what's the saying there? You said they'd rather be wrong than
different.
Different. I think if you take that state of mind back to what property investors do, they typically follow the news articles. And by that stage, it's already too late, because the news has published that data, which is, been reprocessed through the Value General and the land gates, and it's now potentially 6 months old.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get it wrong, is that they are more wrong than different. Yeah. So it's interesting. And I think answering these questions today is going to help us to rather not be wrong and potentially be different.
Fortunately, that is a part of our lives, that emotion does come and go. And that's why having a plan is so important, because, as I said, it's just human nature. There's going to be anxiety. There's going to be fear. There's going to be nerves. Is this doing the right thing, especially when you're playing with your life savings and all that as well. So it's human nature to have that. Hence why having that roadmap is just so important, to make sure you're staying on track regardless of how you're feeling.
100%. So the first question we want to ask is basically, what's the reason for getting this property? Because, people typically get a property because somebody else got a property in that same area. And I think unpacking that to the value of what a roadmap should look like and how that roadmap should be built out into the future is the question that needs to be answered there. If we're looking at a property inside a roadmap, what are the things that you would consider being beneficial to different types of investor profiles that hold different characteristics towards wealth themselves, as a wealth portfolio themselves, or rather as a wealth profile themselves? Let's call a high income earner versus a low income earner. What does that really look like?
Yeah, firstly, I think it's asking yourself why. It's really understanding why you're looking to invest and obviously start to reverse engineer it from there. Obviously, you've got two different profiles there. One is a high net worth individual. Their opportunity, I guess, potential can be a lot different to somebody on a lower income, but their why can still be quite similar. The why, for most people, it's to replace their income. How we can do it can be quite different. Somebody might want to be a lot more aggressive if they haven't got the means to be able to jump straight into bigger investments, whereas other people can be a little bit more conservative and obviously invest knowing they've got a lot more behind them. But I think for most people, it's replacing their income. It's how do we do that? And I think we really got to understand the strategies focusing on wealth creation before cash flow. We really need to be able to buy in the right areas at the right time, get the growth, redraw the equity, get into the next property over and over. Something that we do get asked a lot is, should I pay down the property? Should I get a principal and interest loan, really start to pay it down? Us, and I'm sure you're probably going to agree with it as well, probably not the best strategy. Properties will grow faster than what most people can save. So with that, if we can redraw the equity, get into the next one, have a portfolio that's getting that compounding growth across multiple assets, and then we start to go to that consolidation phase where we start to sell down, use the gains, pay down the debt, or go into things where you're going to get a much higher rental yield. But there is a strategy in place. How aggressive you want to be depends on where you are right now and where you want to end up.
And everybody's got that end up goal as a very different point in time. You get your investors that are in their 40s and their 50s, and they've got potentially 15 or 20 years worth of investing ahead of them before they want to hit retirement. That plan looks very different to somebody in their late 20s. And the difference of opportunity, quite typically somebody in their 40s and 50s is going to be a little bit more mature on the paycheck too. So there's potentially more ability to spend, there's more ability to borrow, there's potentially other assets. The banks would look at them differently to somebody who's on the beginning parts of their journey in employment. And we all know that an employment side of things needs to stack up towards what the lending will allow. So that question of will it fit my roadmap, it needs to be, I think, answered from the perspective of really where can you afford to buy, but also if I buy there, how is that going to then put me into the position to buy another property? And just touching on your point there when you're talking about principal and interest versus interest only, I'm not against principal and interest, but it needs to be for the right reason. I would prefer to buy a interest-only property. I'm still not against principal and interest. The reason why I say that is because I recently purchased a property which required a principal and interest repayment because it was a larger size land lot. And the banks wouldn't fund it because it was atypical to the suburbs format. And the median of the suburb was 4,000 square meter property. And the rest of the suburbs in the area were sitting at around 600, 700 square meters, 500 square meters. So the bank didn't fund safety in that format, and they wanted a little bit more safety in it. Depending on what your plan is on that roadmap to acquire that purchase, that's going to define what your decision should be. And if it requires a principal and interest just so you can get the property because you've now got 4,000 square meters rather than the 700 square meters of the median, then it makes more logical sense because you're buying more land.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So it's not for everybody. There's definitely times and places. Again, if you're buying your own home, you have to buy with principal and interest. In investments, you have the option.
Yeah. What about you though, man? What's your why? Why are you investing?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. So I've got a couple of answers for that actually. So Nat and I, we really want to get to a point where, we love the company, obviously, and the company is my everything. But and I'm so grateful to have people like you guys in it because that's what makes it everything. So the business for me is the vehicle to invest. But investing for me is the path to the end, really. What I ideally would like out of investing and where I'm heading towards, and my idea, is to use the stepping stones of asset ladders. And that means basically buying the right types of assets to leverage up to the next, to leverage up to the next, and leverage up to the next. At the moment, commercial is in sight. It's in sight a lot closer than it was a year ago, but that's because the leveraging of residential assets has been more powerful. And I think that's kind of the place that we would like to end up in terms of an asset return, is to really get some capital from the commercial assets at the end of the day, so that we can start to plan passive cash flow at a net level. But it takes millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of equity to be able to get to that level. And you really have to build that up over a long period of time with a being very comfortable with holding a lot of amount of debt. And as long as you can get that mindset of debt not being bad because it is producing wealth and creating capital, that's really where you can start to separate yourself from knowing that you're buying property versus knowing that you're building a portfolio for purpose.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. How about yourself?
I never really cared too much about money when I was younger. Went to America on a basketball scholarship. And after I finished my 4 years there, I had all this drive and ambition. I had to put it towards something. And one of the options was bodybuilding. Clearly didn't go down that route. The other one was money, because I thought, it's just going to be like a scorecard. And so I could pull the drive and ambition. I guess when I was younger, it was about trying to get that FU money. But then as I started to realize that money gave you options and I could help the people around me with it, that's when I started to realize the importance of money. And that's all money really is. It's just a tool to be able to get you what you want in life. It's not a means to an end, but it is a tool to help you get to the end. And that's when I started to see the importance of it, and just being able to obviously help my family, obviously have my kids grow up in a nice area. I guess give people, I guess they say as a man, you get your fulfillment by seeing other people happy. And I think and being able to give that to my family around me and knowing that money's going to be able to help me do that. And that's when I started to realize the importance of obviously building wealth, and obviously eventually be able to replace the cash flow, and obviously stop trading time for money, get out of the rat race and make money while you sleep, which is the key to wealth.
I love it. You said it's a tool. And I think that's where people really need to start looking at property investing a little bit more closely. The problem is, though, there's a human involved with this tool. and obviously that's the reason why it holds so much emotion. But when people can start to see that it is a thing that then allows you to do a thing or create more things, then it really is just a tool that serves the purpose to the reason for you buying into it, right? You buy the right property, it creates wealth, you use that wealth to expand the portfolio and to create your capital base more aggressively and in different directions than what your salary is allowing you to do in your life at this stage. And if people can see that it's a tool to get you away from the rat race, and that's what they really want to do, then I think that's the new mindset that needs to be adopted, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I heard getting a job like your income, that's addition, whereas investing is multiplication. Whereas obviously you get a job, you make 100 grand a year, and it just keeps 100 grand, 100 grand, 100 grand. Whereas if you multiply it through investing, it goes from 100 grand to 200 to 400 to 800, 1.6, 3.2. And that's just the power of investing, and being able to do that through an asset class like property just really kind of starts pulling things into reality that you didn't think was possible based on your simple $100,000 income.
I love it. Compounding.
Yeah.
There we go.
Eighth wonder of the world. Warren Buffett said compounding interest, eighth wonder of the world. So.
The king of sayings and analogies. I love it.
I actually spoke to somebody today, and they were talking about their roadmap. They said, are these numbers actually achievable? And because they couldn't comprehend the fact of where they are now, and they've now got 6 properties. I think we bought them 4.
Yep.
And I think we're about to buy their 5th. And they were shocked that in 20 years' time, what it actually looks like. And it's the compounding effect, having multiple assets. And this was simply based off the Australian average, which we know we're achieving much more than that. It's at 7%. And that just shows how powerful leveraging money and obviously compounding over many, many years can actually really be.
Okay, so we've spoken a bit around mindset and the why, and why we think it's a good idea. And obviously everybody's subject to their own opinions, but obviously our opinions are backed by proof because we do this so much and we've seen it happen so many times. But this is kind of what we're saying happens. There's obviously an element of risk involved in any type of investing. When it comes into property, it's no different. There's still risk involved. What do you see being the risks that are worth being concerned about versus the ones that really should just sail by and not play a factor on the risk profile?
Yeah, in regards to risk, I guess that's the one thing we can eliminate as much risk as possible by having knowledge, experience, which is obviously teaming up with the right team, being able to obviously make sure we're getting to the right markets at the right time. In regards to the actual, smaller risks, one thing people get fixated is on interest rates. Obviously, it does impact your portfolio as you're building it. But one thing to remember, you married the property, not the interest rate. Interest rates are always going to change. Buying the right asset in the right market at the right time is really going to get you through. So a risk could be our interest rate's going to go up. It's more important to get into a market earlier and not seem to worry about that.
Yeah.
What about yourself, man?
Well, I think I was going to say numbers. Like, really, you have to know your numbers. Not knowing your own numbers is probably the biggest risk.
Yeah, sure.
The property is likely to go through damage over time. It's an asset that is permanently sitting outside.
Yeah.
It's capturing the worst weather conditions and it's going to age. Over that time period, aging is going to cost money. So if you understand your numbers and you know what you can contribute and support that asset in terms of, the value that needs to be then injected into the potential damages that it incurs, as long as it's doing what it's supposed to do inside that market and grow in value, and you have the ability to use your tools, again, cash, money, finance, wealth, whatever, to support the asset, I think that's where people get it wrong, is that they don't understand the risks around their own numbers strong enough. And in Australia and banking, there's so much that we are quite, privileged by, is the word I want to put to it. And we've got the 3% buffer margin, and a lot of people don't really understand this, but when you get interest rate assessments on a loan, and let's say you get a loan approval on a 6% interest rate, the bank's looking at you at a 9% interest rate. They are assessing you being able to pay 3% higher than what the bank is allowing you to. Yes, that doesn't mean that you want to, but it's just that the economy is protected to that point where you can. Yeah. And at the moment, the banks are, I have a feeling that the assessment rate is probably sitting at around 1%, not 3%. And I know I said I wasn't going to go into the budget, but I'm just going to touch on this real quick. But I do feel like because there's so much heat on the Labour government at the moment, that the RBA is almost letting them take the punch for a lot of the attention right now, realising that we have had a massive decline in the capital cities from purchasing over the last quarter. Yeah. And this has been shown and spoken about too many times, as far as I'm concerned, around the drops of the auction clearance rates, because auction clearance rates only account for 25% of the transactions in Australia, but yet the media reports on it like it's everything. And the sentiment has dropped from this, but it's all attached to Labour making really irresponsible decisions. What has happened there is that the market rates have dropped, and people have stopped buying inside these areas, which are the most expensive areas in Australia. And because they've dropped, that means we are spending less. Yet, the RBA has not adjusted the rate, or not adjusted the interest rates, rather. So my assumption here is that our assessment rate is far more safe than 3% right now. It's probably sitting at 1%, I assume. But I think RBA is kind of letting Labour take the fire for a while until they feel like the inflationary figures will then have to be resurfaced, and then we'll start to adjust publicly what that 3% buffer really is, and probably show it to be more attractive, which will then allow us to drop the interest rates. And then people will come back into the market, and I guess this is what we're talking about. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but
I enjoyed the ride.
Tying it all together, and I think it really just comes back to those numbers, really. It's just making sure that you understand your numbers, but not just yours, also the banks, and how actual funding policies work, because as soon as you can understand that, you can find security in any decision that you're making financially.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's one of those things, people love the idea of buying property, investing, and some people catch the property bug where they just want to keep on buying. Yeah. With interest rates where they are now, obviously the price points where they are now, a lot of properties are going to be negative cash flow, especially if you're doing 100% loans where you're obviously using equity to buy it all plus getting lending for the rest. That's where a lot of people do kind of get hit, where they realize how far negative cash flow they become. So it's understanding that balance. And that's why the markets we buy in, they do have stronger yields, because yields keep you in the game, growth gets you out of the game. Money's always going to be in the growth, but we need strong yields. So you don't get too far negative cash flow, hurts your lifestyle, hurts your serviceability as well. But that quote is, somebody reminded me on the weekend, keep track of the cents and the dollars will follow. Yeah. And you really have to track every single dollar, know where it's going in case something happens. As you said, it's an asset that's sitting outside 365 days a year. Something's going to happen, especially when it was built 60 years ago. Yeah. So you've got to be ready for those things and have that worked into your buffers.
You touched on rents there, and I think you're right. Like, rents is super important. Yields, obviously, that mechanism that the banks like to see to get the comfort to pull the equity out of the property and give you a new loan. Yes, yield is important, but it doesn't have to always exist every single time you buy a property. Not at the time when you're buying the property. You just have to be able to see that the pressures are going to be there to support the rent growth over time, so that when the yield is there, it is able to support on the extraction of the equity to fund the next purchase. And I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong, is that they look too closely to yield and they don't pay attention to the data behind the yield being able to increase. Vacancy rates being tight, and we know that because again, going back onto policy, here we go. But because of these changes, the vacancy rates are going to get tighter because they are basically disincentivizing investors into buying investment properties, which is ludicrous.
Yeah.
And very soon will be realized that it is a ludicrous idea, and then all of the investors will flood back because the opportunity is there. But if this does stick, which it won't, vacancy rates will tighten up dramatically. If you're paying attention to your vacancy rates, that's going to show the rental pressures inside a market. The rental pressures inside a market means that people will start to then pay more for rental properties inside those areas because there's a necessity for that. As soon as that happens, over time, and it shouldn't happen quickly and aggressively because nobody wants to stress out the local renting market. You want that renting market to be comfortable. You still want it to be within the affordability belt. But over time, after you've purchased that property and the rent goes up, once that yield is there at the time when your equity is also there, that's the priority. You don't have to buy into a strong yielding property from day one. You need the capital, but then you also need the yield, and they both need to marry up at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. I think a philosophy that we really kind of align with, Wayne Gretzky, greatest hockey player of all time, he said he based his whole career on what his father told him when he's young. Don't go to where the puck is, go to where the puck's going to be. Yeah. And that's, I think, so important with investing. It's not where the market is right now, it's where it's going to be, as you're talking about those pressures.
Love it.
Rental-wise, but also the demand to be able to purchase those properties really kind of can help you catapult very quickly when you're thinking forward, not in the present.
Which takes us, I guess, into, I love the analogy again, another one, which takes us into, I guess, what happens when you do buy a property. Like, obviously, we're speaking about why you buy a property, why you get into it. Let's say we go and we purchase a property, it goes up by, let's call it 15% or 20% over 12 to 18 months. And it then creates at that time, because it's now gone through a new lease, and it's gone from, let's call it 4.8% or 4.5% up to 5%. That time, how does that process look to an investor to get that loan out? Now we know, obviously, we understand that process, but for an investor to get ready for that, what do they need to consider for their next purchase? Because they're obviously holding an asset right now, which is attached to the debt, and they're obviously that debt is then attached to their income profile, and it's creating rental return. How does somebody need to prepare to get into the next asset, considering what they already have in front of them?
Well, I always try to explain it is a two-step process. We'll come back to a few other things as well. Two-step process. Firstly, you need to obviously go back to your mortgage broker. They're going to go get a value. When obviously that gets reassessed, we can talk about how that works, where the bank values it at $1 million. They'll allow you to borrow 80% of that, which is $800,000, minus whatever debt's left on that. And whatever you're left with, that's your available working equity. That's the first step, how much equity you've got. The next step is, obviously, then you've got to actually go and get a loan for the rest. So how much you can actually borrow for the rest of it, and that's your total purchasing power. Reason why that needs to happen first is just so because we need to understand exactly what you can actually buy and which market we need to put you in. Do you need more cash flow? Do you need more growth? The structuring as well for that type of asset. Is it best to put in your personal name, a company, a trust as well? But if you can't even borrow the money right now, that's where it becomes a bit problematic. And then you got to think, well, are you going to sit there and wait for a while? Are you going to sell down? Are you going to restructure, refinance as well? So that's probably the best way, is really understand what's the property worth, then getting your finance, what you can borrow. And then once you've got that knowledge, then we can really start to plot around what we're going to do with it.
There's one big hurdle that a lot of people face when it comes to getting the valuation of the property understood. And we've seen it a couple times. You know exactly where I'm going with this one. Don't go back to your bank alone. Yeah. Don't go and ask your bank, okay, bank, what are you going to give me out of this that you see the value in? Go and get other opinions. One bank, especially the bank that you have the debt with already, isn't going to necessarily fight for your business. So they're going to give you what they think is fair. And fair for you versus fair for what another bank would see fair for you is very, very different. Yeah. As we know, banks lend and they calculate the valuations, obviously on their own sort of palatable risk profiles, but they also want your business. And so they will make it attractive to move the money over to that business so that they can create the interest from the loans that you take out. So like we know that NAB lately, for example, sorry NAB, but they've been quite aggressive lately on their valuations, and they've not really been very, maybe aggressive is the wrong word, they haven't been aggressive enough. And they're not really wanting to clearly lend out too much at the moment. There are banks that have different cycles and banks that are are willing to value higher than other banks. It's not necessarily just the valuation of the property that's coming in from the value, it's also the palatable debt that the bank wants to then hold in being able to gain off the interest of lending out money to the public. And that comes from couple of different places. It doesn't come from just the valuer, it also comes from the internal economics around which state and territory they feel is growing or falling, or what the national GDP looks like from a securities level, and the state levels, even GDP. And these all play a part to the banks making a decision of what they value your asset to be, for them to find safety to give you the equity to use for other loans, basically creating more debt for themselves and increasing your debt too. Not all banks work equal, and really people need to go and assess a few different options in that process.
Yeah, two things I always tell people. Firstly, there is about a 35% range between the banks. You say which banks are being more generous at the time, especially if they've given a lot of money over the last few years. Their risk to debt is going to start to pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
So definitely go and speak to multiple banks. Secondly, your broker has a clawback with that actual bank. So
that's true.
If you want to get a property revalued within 12 months and obviously it goes to another bank, that broker actually loses 100% of their commission within the first 12 months. If it's within 2 years, they'll lose 50% of their commission. So a lot of times your broker doesn't even want to pull you to another bank because of their own pockets.
Yeah.
So something to be mindful there as well.
Yeah, and it's not just the commission, the trail gets cut too if you don't use the broker again.
Yeah.
So there's, it's not to say don't use your broker. Brokers are fantastic. It's just ask your broker to do more of a thorough due diligence on the extraction process.
Are they working in your best interest? Or that's a lot of times you get a lot of good brokers that they know it's a long-term relationship, and even if they have to, they're still going to get paid by the next bank they're going to go to. But that's one thing, you want to make sure you got a broker that's obviously doing their due diligence and I guess giving you all your options so you know exactly where you can really capitalize.
Yeah. So I guess, look, the things that we've covered today are really understanding your why, understanding that education for yourself is important, not to follow the herd, but rather to be different rather than make mistakes. We've spoken about understanding what your financial profile needs to look like and understanding your own finances, because your own finances, again, are the tools that allow you to really make these decisions and get you into these positions of wealth creation. We've spoken about treating them like tools and understanding that an asset is there to serve a purpose, and that purpose needs to be treated like a tool in your toolkit. And we've spoken about understanding a little bit more around the finances and the lending markets, and really anything else around, probably educating yourself further about the finances of the country and finances of the lending landscape and how banks really work around those things. Is there anything else that we would include in any of this sort of education around mindset of purchasing an investment property to put into your portfolio before we close off?
I guess with that, fear holds a lot of people back. We speak to so many people. They know they should be doing this, but they're just too fearful to do it. They say the only two fears we're born with, it's the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear has been instilled, trained, programmed with us. And a lot of people just have a fear of investing. Speak to a few financial advisors and they say one of the first things they sit down and talk to people and try and understand their psychology of money and their perspective on it. Some people just are so scared to let go of it. But that's the thing. That's how you got to use your money to make more money. The Richest Man in Babylon, the book, talks about see your money as gold soldiers, and you need to take your gold soldiers and make them go create and bring you back more gold soldiers. So it's the psychology of money that I feel a lot of people need to address to help them just to start investing.
Man, I love having a chat with you, and I really love bringing you on the podcast to understand a little bit more about like the psychology of investing, because you've got these 3 psychology majors already.
Yeah,
and
three
I think
3 degrees, yeah.
3 degrees, and sorry, not majors. But still, I mean, I think a lot of more people need to adopt this mindset. And every time I bring you onto the podcast and we have a chat around these things, I think I learn something new every single time. So thanks for your wise words of wisdom. It reassures me, and I really enjoy these topics, mate. Thank you.
No, thank you, man. Obviously, always love to be here as well. It's always exciting. So,
right. Guys, thanks for joining us on another episode of the Lazy Equity Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this one today. The only thing I could leave you with today would be to get ready, because the sentiment shift is something that is very, very lagged in response when we start to see that change. what we can see in the data is that there is a change already, but that change in data has to be repurposed through about 6 months worth of digestion. If you guys can get ready in the meantime, take some of the tips and the hints that we've given you in this episode, get yourselves ready, get on track, and we'll see you on the playing field. Until next time, see you guys.